just when you thought NBA free agency couldn't get any crazier after the Ja Morant trade, that I'm personally still trying to wrap my head around what the future next steps are for that Portland Trailblazers team. Apparently, the Sacramento Kings are set to meet with Jalen Duren, the center from the Detroit Pistons, and pitch an idea of a sign and trade that would send Domantas Sabonis back to the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons already lost so much front court depth and defense. What would that look like for them? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we got other moves. Jonathan Kuminga getting waived, other stuff going on. Kristaps Porzingis, he gets a new deal, which now takes the mid-level exception off the table for their possible pursuit of LeBron. We're trying to make sense of everything going on. Tomorrow, free agency opens up officially, but we're going to talk about it all and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of the Full Court Podcast. I'm one of those here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at the Full Court YT on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it for today, man. Listen, NBA free agency has been absolutely crazy. And I don't know, like, of course, me sitting on this side of it and doing this job as far as covering it, it's even more crazy than when you're just a fan, right? Because when you start thinking about all the little ins and outs and the salary implications of all this stuff, like it just paints the situation where you're still trying to wrap your head around what the hell is going on here, what are these teams doing, and what's the plan here. And we're going to talk about one of those situations as of, today, later on in the day, we got it reported that the Sacramento Kings do plan to meet with Jalen Duren and pitch a situation in which a sign and trade with Jalen Duren going to the Sacramento Kings and Domantas Sabonis going back to the Detroit Pistons. Now, it makes sense when you think about it in the sense that, yeah, the Pistons would be losing a center, so of course they would want a center back in Domantas Sabonis. Now, I don't know what that does for them as far as frontline defense. Now, they did need another offensive player, like we talked about how they need creation and all that type of stuff. And, he also helps with rebounding. Domantas Sabonis is still a really good rebounder. But it does raise some questions on, is this the right move? Is this a panic? What's going on here? So, for those that don't know, when we talk about things, we talk about both sides of every argument. We're going to talk about a lot of different perspectives on this, and let's start with the Sacramento Kings, right? Is them targeting Jalen Duren a smart move or a panic move, or a smart reset or a panic move, right? Like, it's clear that the Sacramento Kings have been searching for a new direction since they traded De'Aaron Fox. They had, and they need to move off of Zach LaVine, who moved into this deal and all that type of stuff. They needed a new direction. Now, part of that came, luckily, when they were able to draft Darius Acuff as their point guard of the future. So that right there makes some things a little bit clearer. They already had Keegan Murray on their team as well, who was a player that is 25 years old, which his brother just got traded in the Ja Morant trade. But he's a player that showed a lot of promise, right? But, he took a bit of a step back with DeMar. You have to learn how to play with DeMar once DeMar's on your team. You have Nick Clifford there as well, another player that has some upside that you're going to be trying to develop at some point in time. So adding a 22-year-old Jalen Duren to this team would make a lot of sense because it's another young player that fits your next step, right? And when you think about having Darius Acuff and the fact that he is not a great defender by any, or even a serviceable defender by any stretch of the imagination, at least not yet, having that frontline defense of a Jalen Duren. And we know around the NBA, one of the best things you want to do is pair a guard with a center. And if you're able to do that, it happens, right? So if Jalen Duren wants to go to Sacramento, then yeah, that matters in restricted free agency, and it is there, right? He will bring elite finishing, rebounding, and physicality to the Sacramento Kings team that does not have that. And, while I don't think it really turns them around immediately, but at 22 years old, it's a younger timeline, and you have that runway to try to build. Now, does this seem like a panic move? I don't know if I can call it a panic move. Like, the Kings should be panicking over the state of their franchise with the salary and all of that. And with Jalen Duren's playoff production dropping, you guys know how I feel about that. For a young 22-year-old center, sometimes they take a while in regards to it. Swapping Sabonis for Jalen Duren is probably one of the best things that you can get for Domantas Sabonis. Not to say that you can't get pitched back for Sabonis, because he is a player that can help a winning team. But I think when you look at it, if you weren't going to move him in this draft and get a draft pick in this draft, getting a 22-year-old, all defensive team center to pair with your guard who's defensively limited, you can make it make sense in that regard. I think even with Keegan Murray, if he's going to be your long-term four, what he does, it helps him even a little bit more on that, because he's a guy that averages a career 5.6 rebounds. So And last year he had over a block and a half per game, his first time even averaging over a block, but you could form a front court that you then really think in investing in and building out and going forward. So that's not a bad thing, right? So I think this thing for the Kings, it seems like this will be them choosing a timeline. The upside is real. The risk is that Jalen Duren is just not ready to be kind of the centerpiece of a rebuild, but even then, he doesn't have to be it by himself. It would be him and Darius Acuff. Now, on the flip side of this, the Pistons side of it, should they be trading Jalen Duren for Sabonis? Let's talk about why they should consider it. One, Sabonis gives the Detroit Pistons a proven veteran big man that's been in the playoffs before. He can pass, he can rebound, he sets really hard screens, and he can help stabilize that offense for sure. Now, I think with them being in win now mode as well, you get somebody like that, it makes it sense, right? If Jalen Duren is unhappy with the contract offers and the Pistons, they want to protect the value and stuff like that, at the end of the day, getting Sabonis in there, it makes sense, right? And I think the fit there could make some sense, at least offensively. Now, the side that the Pistons should be at least considering keeping Jalen Duren is the fact that he is extremely young. This is a kid that just averaged 19.5 points and 10 rebounds in the regular season. That just doesn't grow on trees, right? Big man with that type of physical profile become very hard to find, especially as we're moving towards a different type of big in the league, right? And trading a 22-year-old all-NBA center for an older big could very well age poorly when it comes down to it, right? And keep in mind, Sabonis only played 19 games last season. So I think with this, Detroit is going to have to ask themselves whether Sabonis makes them good enough right now to get out the Eastern Conference. And if it doesn't, what other moves do you have to do? Because that plays a part into this as well, on if this upgrade or this next step is worth it, right? And what does this mean for Domantas Sabonis as a player? A fresh start can help him. I think he's ready to get out the Sacramento Kings. I think everything that's happened there since they fired Mike Brown, traded De'Aaron Fox, everything, Domantas Sabonis' time with the Kings we all knew was up, right? And Detroit can use his passing, they can use a veteran presence, and they can use him as a more polished offensive hub, especially in those moments where Cade Cunningham is off the court. I think a change of scenery helps reset his value as well. And if both sides are interested, it's a clean move, right? I think it's a clean move. But there still are questions that remain around Sabonis. The injury-shortened season that he had, right? That's a major concern, especially as players get older. The defensive limitations would still matter in playoff matchups just as big as anything else, and you would need to reshape your spacing around that and your defensive coverages around that as well. So the fit there, it's heavily relying on what happens, what they do with the rest of the Pistons roster, and I guess we'll see. But Sabonis is still a really good player, and this trade will put a lot of pressure on Detroit to prove it's ready to win now, in my opinion. So I guess we'll see. Jonathan Kuminga, moving on from that. Jonathan Kuminga, the Hawks declined Jonathan Kuminga's option, which we kind of expected, right? $24.3 million is a lot to play for a player that averaged 12.2 points when getting to Atlanta. Also, Atlanta's going to kind of a more open system. Jonathan Kuminga is very on-ball dominant. And Kuminga still has questions around his consistency, his shooting, the role, the best position for him to play. And now with the Hawks wanting more cap flexibility to do things and bringing players that fit kind of that mold, what they need more, it's there. Now, is the fresh market going to help reset his value? I doubt that, right? But I to be honest with you, I don't really see many ways that Atlanta regrets this. Yes, Kuminga's young, he's athletic, and wings that have the ability to shoot and space and all those type of things. But letting him hit the unrestricted market, not trying to trade him at least, could come back to bite him, especially if he does go to a team where the role he's able to have fits him better, and he finally hits that leap that people expected from him. And we'll see, because there's going to be a team that's going to bet on the upside of Jonathan Kuminga, and they're going to hope that bet helps unlock him in a lot of ways. And so we'll see. This is the classic conversation of upside versus the current price. And Kuminga has tools, but Atlanta clearly didn't want to pay for the idea of who Jonathan Kuminga could be, and they lived more in the reality of who Jonathan Kuminga is right now. And I think that's not a bad option for them at all, and we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that. Overall, I'll say this. Jonathan Kuminga is a player that does have talent. But we know in the NBA, just because you have talent, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to turn that into something consistently that NBA teams can bet on. We just got to see if Kuminga could do that. But moving on to the next topic, the Thunder picked up the option on Lu Dort's contract, which they're keeping him. And so now this has started the conversation on, are they keeping him to keep him long-term, or did they pick up the option to keep him long-term, or did they pick him up to trade him? I think it's the latter. I think it's to trade him, but let's talk about both sides. One, why should they keep Lu Dort? He's still one of the best point-of-attack defenders in the league, and people who can go and guard out on the perimeter and still be just as good guarding in the paint are very rare. the toughness that he brings matters in huge playoff matchups as well. And I think you still do need veterans, and you have so much continuity there. $17.7 million for a defensive wing, I think it's very reasonable in today's market. And we've seen, too, that Lu Dort does have a little bit more offensive capability when you need to rely on him. Now, the playoffs last year were kind of hit or miss for Lu Dort, but, we've seen seasons of Lu Dort, averaging double-digit points, 17 points and stuff like that, and being a factor on the offensive side of the ball. But the fact is that, as the role shrinks from him there, he averaged 8.3 points last year. That's after coming off of four straight years of averaging double figures. In 2021-22, he averaged 17 points per game, which went down to 13, then 10, and then 10 again, and now the 8.3. So Lu Dort has shown capability. But I think at the same time, you know what he brings defensively, and that's really where he hangs his hat on, and rightfully so. But then the side of why OKC Thunder could trade him. The option. You have to pick up the option if you want to trade him. That's just the period part on it, right? And with the rising payroll with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren and things like that, they also re-signed Isaiah Hartenstein. They still sit slightly above the second tax apron. Moving Lu Dort would get them below that second tax apron, while they still added some talent to their team as well. Drafting the Daymar, getting Sturts into that roster as well. Like, they have added some talent, different type of talent. I'm not saying they just replace Lu Dort one for one, because no, that doesn't happen. But they've added some talent and changed the makeup of their roster a little bit, and that's really what they wanted to do in regards to that. But if the OKC Thunder want to get below that second tax apron, moving on from Lu Dort is going to have to be the reason that they can get that done. And they're going to have to look into that, right? If they can trade him. I think that, you have enough depth on the OKC Thunder team where you can explore trades that clearly put you on the right side of the deal, whether it's future picks, whatever it is, or somebody absorbing that money and sending you picks back. That's what you want to look at. So right now, I'll say this and end it on this. The Thunder picking up Lu Dort's contract does not mean that Lu Dort is safe. It means that OKC Thunder preserved an asset. Now, what they decide to do with that asset, that's what we're waiting to see on. But don't take that as it meaning that they're going to guarantee to keep him and hold on to him. But we're going to see. Last topic of the day before we get up out of here, the Golden State Warriors re-signed Kristaps Porzingis on a 2-year, $40 million deal, which is $20 million per. And we know Kristaps Porzingis, when healthy, gives him size, shooting, some front court skill, all that type of stuff. And when you also look at them retaining Al Horford as well, it shows that they are looking at the depth in that front court. They also drafted Yaxel Lindenberg. We'll see what happens in regards to that one, but they needed big man help. But the downside of this is that how it complicates the LeBron dream, right? We heard that they want to trade for AD and then turn around and try to convince LeBron to come for the mid-level exception. Well, now, with this deal, it means that the mid-level exception offer is the full non-taxpayer mid-level exception, at least, is done. That's not going to have to be something that they have access to. So it feels like if LeBron was a serious target for them, this feels like a pivot, that they got word that LeBron wasn't going to come, at least not for the mid-level exception, or because it was also reported that the AD trade would be key to getting LeBron to agree to go there, that either one of those things aren't going to happen. So now they've moved on to their plan B, right? And I think you also have to look at Porzingis, like he has that illness that's going to make him miss some games. He shot 31% from three while he was with the Golden State Warriors. The health is always a concern for him as well. So I do think now, I get it, that this is a realistic move that they went after, rather than the fantasy of getting LeBron and AD to come here. And I talked about it earlier when I dropped that episode, that it felt like a 2K move, right? Now they're playing in reality. And so we'll see what this means for the rest of the Golden State Warriors offseason. But as it stands right now, it does not look like that offseason is going to include getting LeBron James to come for the mid-level exception. But you guys can let me know how you feel on all of that down below, man. How do you feel about everything? How do you feel about Jalen Duren potentially going to the Detroit Pistons, the Kristaps Porzingis re-signing, the Jonathan Kuminga option not being picked up? What do you guys feel about all of that? Let me know that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at the Full Court YT, which stands for YouTube, by the way, if you didn't know that, on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything NBA and basketball related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
Been a presentation of the Breaks Media.